But no matter what happens, the world will look to the United States for lessons on what has worked and what hasn't. CCTV's Jessica Stone spoke exclusively with the top regulator in one of the top producing states, Chris Abruzzo, acting head of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection.
Our department, our mission is to protect our land, our air, and our water resources. And the oil and gas industry has the potential to impact all of those vital resources in Pennsylvania. So while we're very much focused on how wells get drilled and how natural gas is extracted from those wells, we're also focused on the kinds of things that can happen at a natural gas well that can impact our streams, that can impact our air quality. And so it's really all encompassing.
Have you been able to keep up?
We've kept up, but it's an enormous challenge. Not the least of which is many of our very experienced oil and gas professionals have been lured into the private sector to work for companies in the oil and gas industries.
There was a Harvard study in the past few months that was released this spring that found that companies failed to list their wells. 2 out of 5 fractured wells were not on the website at all. Do you have any recourse when that happens?
And it was specific to Pennsylvania?
It was out of all 8 states.
I'm not aware of instances where companies in Pennsylvania haven't registered the drilling of those wells because they need a well construction permit from us before they can even drill the well. I would say.
But is there an enforcement mechanism for the Department of Environmental Protection to ensure that they do in fact put their chemicals online? Do you have that written into law?
We could suspend any permit based on failure to comply with our regulations. So that's sort of an across-the-board fail-safe, not only for this industry, but for any of the regulated industries in Pennsylvania.
Have you had to do that related to this issue?
We've not had to do that. I think industry understands we're not going to pull punches. I mean, if rules and regulations are broken, there will be consequences. I'd like to think that as an agency, we also recognize that sometimes there are rational explanations for why something isn't done in accordance with our timelines. And as long as industry is willing to correct whatever deficiency exists, I don't expect that we would suspend a permit. But if it's willful and it's continuing, I would have no problem suspending permits for any activity.
Don't you see your role as an advocate for the citizens of Pennsylvania in the sense that if they don't have usable water because of an incident with an oil and gas company, that there needs to be a quick response from this department?
No, I think that's wrong. I think the key is we're not an advocate, we're an advocate to protect the environment, but what we learned in instances like Dept was, where you have methane gas already in water wells, you can draw conclusions. If you move too quickly, you can draw conclusions that are wrong. And just like it's not fair to have someone's water well impacted by oil and gas drilling activity, it's also not fair for someone to benefit when the contamination in the water well is not caused by oil and gas drilling activity. So the key for us is to get it right. I will tell you the number of contaminated water well complaints is, when compared, in comparison to the number of water wells that exist in Pennsylvania, the number of complaints associated with oil and gas drilling activity is not all that high. I mean, there are some incidents that are real serious incidents, and they need to be taken
When you
very
say not
seriously.
all that high, what do you mean?
I think the total number of complaints might have been I want to say the total number of actual homes might have been 160.
Is that considered lower than previous years? Or low period?
I'm using that as a total when you consider there are millions of homes in Pennsylvania. So
you think that's acceptable?
I don't know if it's acceptable. I just think it needs to be perspective to it.
Okay.
I think there has been an awful lot of media attempts to portray the natural gas industry as, people lighting their faucets on fire. I mean, there's a lot of hype surrounding the actual activity, and all I can speak to is the numbers.
How do you respond to criticisms? You talked about the balance that you have to play between industry and individuals. How do you respond to the criticisms that this government, this administration is cozy with the oil industry?
I find that to be sort of humorous, because I get criticized all the time by folks in the industry that we're too tough and that we require too high of standards. And the one thing I say I've said this to folks in the oil and gas industry for 5 months, in the 5 months I've been here, it is not the department's job to be the cheerleader for the industry. We want, as Pennsylvanians, this industry is creating jobs. It's created a boost to our economy. It can be a very good thing. But our job at DEP is to regulate it safely so that it doesn't harm our environment. And for folks that come in from other states that don't understand our legacy, the one thing I'm very proud of as a Pennsylvanian, and I think Pennsylvanians themselves should be proud of, is that we've powered an industrial revolution in this country based from coal, right? So we had,
and now you're doing it with natural gas.
And now we're doing it with natural gas. And the good thing about Pennsylvanians is we've learned from the mistakes of the past, and so that moving forward into the future, we're not going to make the same mistakes. We're still repairing and correcting some of the environmental scars left behind by a wonderful industry, an industry that again, powered this country.
Chris Abruzzo, Acting Director of the Environmental Protection Department here in the state of Pennsylvania, thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.